things in relation to others, how these plants have helped not only yourself but others. At the Breaking Convention, when we shared that platform together, you again, I can't remember the title off the top of my head on exactly what the title was.
Yeah, I think it was something like can psychedelics end white supremacy? Something like that.
There you go.
But maybe it wasn't a question. I don't know.
Yeah. And what I do remember was it really hit home for a lot of people. You know, I don't think there had been a title like that at the Breaking Convention. So it definitely pulled people out. They wanted to see and hear. And what I gathered from that, you know, just from the observation, using my permaculture skills and observing, I remember by the end of your 20 to 30 minute presentation, you know, half the audience was in tears, man, and was, you know, literally in tears. And the other half who weren't in tears were moved. And, you know, I don't know how many people you remember approaching you at the end and touching base with you, but all were aware that I curated that space. I remember for weeks after, me getting emails from people saying, like, who was that lady? When's the video going up? And what she was saying was very important. And we don't hear enough of that. And, you know, just the subject matter of white supremacy, like, what the hell is that? People are not even really talking about that. I know at the moment there's this term floating around, white privilege. And, you know, some people are, you know, picking up on that. But that's again, we really like to make things light and fluffy, you know. When you think of white supremacy and white privilege, you know, it has different loads, it has different baggage. So you just really came with it. You was on this, like, this, what can psychedelics end white supremacy, basically? So where was you going with that? Where are you going with that? And why was you bringing that to the, you know, to the audience? You know, what inspired you to consider that?
Well, I think it was, I think it's because I'd had to use plant medicine to really try and get myself back. Shall I go into my son first?
We're going to leave that right to the end if you don't mind.
Okay, so I'll go
if you can do it that way, yeah.
No, it's all right. We'll get to that one. So I think because, I think probably because I was a bit older, and then you've gone through so many things in life, and then, you know, you discover these plants, these medicines, and you start unloading, you start unpacking. I was actually quite surprised how much stuff was not being revealed to me that I was becoming aware of, because these medicines and compounds were removing veils. I think that's how it was. And so the first actual veil, and it's good we did the talk before, now we're doing it again, because then you start thinking about stuff. So I think the first veil that came off for me was, I started thinking, this world is really interesting in the way in which it's effed up, because we're told that men are at the top. But then if you look at it, it's really, one of the first things that came to me is, men are only allowed to wear trousers. And I sort of thought, this is really peculiar, that they're supposed to be at the top. They are the freest. They get the most amount of money. They get the most amount of respect. You know, if a man is talking, everybody's supposed to listen. If a man's testimony in court is next to a woman's, his weighs more, but he's only allowed to wear trousers. And then it kind of started there, and then it moved to, and he's not allowed to really cry or show emotion. And it's like, but we're human beings, we're emotional creatures. So it kind of started from there, of realizing that, everybody's got a pedestal, and in relation to somebody else, you're up or down. But actually nobody, what seems to happen in the system is you're taught, you're given like on Nelson's column, they stick men on the top of that. But actually for that, you're not allowed to be human and cry and show emotions, and you're only allowed one item of clothing around your feet. It's like, this is mad. And then you've got, underneath that, you've got women. Okay, you can't earn as much as these men. We're never going to listen to you that much, but you can wear whatever you like, and you have access to all the emotions. And then, so I started seeing that, oh my God, this system is amazing. I think I must have seen it on some kind of a trip. I think I must have seen it in something, because then it was like I was aware that wherever you went or whatever society you looked at, it could be almost like on some kind of a grid form, and you saw almost like, yep, you get to keep this because we're taking that away from you, we've taken that away from you, and we're giving it to these. So it just all started to come to me, I think, in that way. So then thinking about it in terms of white supremacy or white advantage or white privilege, what was really interesting was I thought, well, if you look at things that anthropologists have written about different groups of people over the century, one of the main things is when a population starts to not replace itself by not having children, it's described as a real catastrophe. It is a sign that that population has completely lost hope and doesn't want to replace itself, cannot see a future. And I thought, this is really mad, because this is what's happening in the white population. The only white people talking about it talk about it in racist terms of, you know, we mustn't let the black and brown people take over the world, they're having too many children, instead of going, what's wrong in our society that we are not replacing ourselves? You know, they racialize it. And then I started speaking to my white friends who don't want to have children, and person after person, each one said, I don't want to bring children into this world like it is. And I started thinking, this is crazy, because I think people of African descent and indigenous peoples around the world, it's kind of like, we should be saying that, but we're not saying that. So what is it that they're seeing and feeling? And what I started to see is, the gift that was taken away from them is the language around their dissatisfaction of this racialized oppressive system that they are supposed to be the benefactors of. But all language of dissent around it's kind of like been taken away, and it's kind of gone inwards. So it's like, you know, you have the keys to the mansion, but actually, you know, that mansion was stolen and there's dead bodies under it, and it's a really horrible mansion. So all the people who've had the mansion stolen from them are on the outside thinking, man, if I was in that mansion, and the person with the keys knows how it was gotten and just can't sleep in it. And that's what I realized for me was like, oh my God, this is crazy, because we are all on the outside of the mansion talking about what's been stolen from us, thinking this is the only story. But actually, the people who can't go into, who've inherited the mansion, are suffering as well, but they don't even know. And the only,
yeah, powerful. Sorry.
yeah. Yeah, it's just crazy, because I think, but then because you have to give them an outlet, they've been given wildlife protection. So that's that, and I realized that's why sometimes we of African descent can't quite get why white people will dive under a bus for a fox or a, you know, or a rat in a lab. Like, we can't get it. And I realized, yeah, we can't get it because we can see the whole picture from the view that we've been allowed. And so we can see more of the picture than they can see. And they can't get why we're not willing to dive under under the bus for a rat in a lab, you know. And I just thought, this is really, really, really interesting, because it's still these levels of control. And yeah, and I just think, okay, then they too need to use psychedelics for that, for the blinker that they've been given, because actually they want to change the world, we want to change the world, but we've all got our particular blinkers, and to be able to really change the world, we've got to use the medicine to get those blinkers off. So yeah, those are the things that I'm still kind of exploring all the different ways the machine keeps us all locked in our boxes.
Sis, well, you're onto something. Like I said, you had 100% of the audience engaged, half of them crying by the end, the other half touched and moved. And, you know, speaking with some of the people, what I got from it, just like you explained for your own experience, and I've experienced my own, the veils, the layers being removed, you know, the onion layers, or the armor that you build around yourself, you know, the illusion, the ego, call it what you want. And you have to remove those layers to be able to see, to acknowledge, and to move forward. And in some cases, what I found out is that some people consider that as like the bad trip, you know, when the layers, and it starts revealing to you that, oh, maybe you've been pointing fingers, and some of that should, you know, you've got to take responsibility for it. So we get that. And as much as we might have said in the African Caribbean community, oh, the white man this or the white man that, within my experiences, it brings back home to that, well, what are you doing about it? What are you going to do? How can, you know, why are you making excuses? And, you know, and sometimes it's not a nice ride, you know what I'm saying? And I gathered that what you done that day was you done that in the room through just sharing, because you made people face things that they wasn't willing to, or generally, you know, up for facing. And they had no choice because they decided and agreed to sit in that room for 20 minutes or half an hour, and you just came with it. And like, I realized like it was a bad trip for some people, it was a liberating trip for some people, but either or, we know there's no, you know, bad trips in that sense, that you know, you can learn from that. And I really felt that you opened up something that day for, and in that room we had many movers and shakers in the psychedelic community, in the, you know, the revolutionary, you know, sustainable, you know, eco world, you know, in all these places they were in that room, man. And they heard, you know, they heard what you had to say, and I thought it was very powerful. And I didn't think many people had been and were brave enough to stand up and share it in a way that you did. And you hit onto something, because again, it's bringing me back to the things that I was reading yesterday. People just think, you know, okay, you would say that because you're, you know, of African heritage, you're looking out for your, you know, people, your background, and now you're saying that we need to do, you know, but you're the guys committing crimes, you're the guys who are, you need to sort your shit out. And we do this a lot, you know, and I've witnessed that. But I just want to bring again this book here, because it's really important, because it lets me know at many levels how this operation has functioned. And there are groups of people that history identifies, not Darren, not Akua, not, you know, arguably that history identifies as the main players, you know, who make things happen and who don't make things happen. I'm just bringing this book again. I really encourage people to check this one out. This is really dealing with a shifting in that consciousness, in that ability to look oneself in the mirror from a gender perspective. It's been done from a race perspective. You know, you need to pick up, you know, books that remind me of like the ISIS papers by Dr. Francis Welting, where you know, she shows you the 7 areas in life, you know, and others have, you know, touched on it, that, you know, the powers that be, so to speak, have to govern to make sure that they can manage and control and continue their supremacy. And, you know, and this book really goes into it, but it doesn't go into it from a race perspective, it goes into it to a gender perspective, but then lets you know the people who were practicing and had these more holistic approaches to dealing with and addressing things, and their, what we might call today, integration, their ways of integrating their experiences and allowing that to filter out, so you don't carry the baggage and the load. And then you don't point fingers. You don't then look at other groups and other people saying this is what they do and this is who they are and they're bad people for it. And you can check yourself, and you can say, look, you also need to check yourself. And this book goes real into details about how certain groups are not able to do that. They're just not, why they're not able to do that, and the history that, you know, that they brought with them of making sure that other groups wouldn't operate in that vein, where naturally that's where they came from. They came from a holistic approach. And last but not least, this is a book, one of the early books that I bought. Like, I was a teenager when I bought this book, and I've been misnaming it for a long time. I keep on calling it the Caveman Inheritance, but it's actually the Iceman Inheritance. And the subtitle is Prehistoric Sources of Western Man's Racism, Sexism, and Aggression. And it's by a European guy called Michael Bradley. And again, I picked this up, you know, this is like 20, 25 years ago, that kind of time period I was delving into this. And it's going into what you're talking about, sis. So I would, between these two books, like your field of subject matter for the Breaking Convention a year or 2 years ago, however long ago it is now, you know, it's nothing new in that sense, but it's not being vocalized, it's not being shared, and especially with the psychedelic problem solving potential that it has, we can now not just have these discussions and it get thrown side to side and everybody pointing fingers and this, that, and the other. We can really get to the root of the problem. And that's what I think was very key into what you were sharing that day, and why it might have thrown some people off or scared some people in what we all share, because we're telling people, well, it's allowed me to get to the root, center. I've got to now start dealing with my shit. Are you prepared to go to the root and center of your shit and start dealing with your shit? And that is not what these two books are showing me that people are comfortable with it. And it takes a lot for people to get to that place and space. So
I'm going to get those two for sure. Going to get those two. Excellent. That'd be great.
Because what it showed me in this book in particular was that, you know, pre the, you know, the Iceman inheritance being distributed around the world, people were cool.
Yes.
You know, and they did have differences. There was politics, we all know this, but just the way it was handled, the way it was dealt with, there was an approach. And, you know, definitely the goddess, the queens and the kings didn't have the dictatorship, the supreme approach that, you know, we're currently under now, basically. So with that said, as I mentioned, because we've got the new political leaders, the new kings, the new queens, the new elders, because as you know, coming in, because there's a cycle that ushers that new wave in, I believe that a lot of them are privy to psychedelics, you know, whether they're politicians, whether they're doctors, and they're not as the previous generation about it, which will then allow maybe research to take place where we can explore psychedelics, like is what happening, but will those same people repeat the same mistakes? Let's have the same approach well, let's keep it all to ourselves, and this is what it's all about. And what history has shown me is that doesn't work well, and it's not worked well. And like we need to redesign or reconfigure, you know, the model, evaluate and tweak and stuff. So big up, sis, for getting up and letting people know what time it is in that regards there.